Welcome to the 32nd episode of the God and Game Theory podcast, where we learn how to break free from the shackles of this world. Because heaven on earth may be closer than you realize. And that's why we're all here with eyes to see the devil's disguise. I'm your host, Tom Peterson, and yes, we are living in the most incredible period of time in the history of mankind. So I'm really glad that you're here. Because in this episode, I'm going to be providing you with a glimpse into the underworld, the dark side, where Satan and his armies do their work and where they reside. So I wouldn't go anywhere because what you're about to witness will open your eyes to a world that many never even knew existed. So with that in mind, I want to go back in time to a period of time that's was very similar to the times that we're living in now. The time of the Roman Empire. And I want to get into the book of Revelation because I have covered this in a few videos before this, but I do want to give everyone a refresher in terms of what I'm referring to with regard to the hybrid beast making his return. And so when we get into Revelation 17:8, roughly, it talks about the return of the hybrid beast because the Roman Empire was destroyed at the second coming of Jesus Christ and did not exist for the 1,000-year period of the millennial reign. So that empire had been destroyed. It was gone, but it returned. It came back. And it came back in a different variation or a different form. You're looking at it here, and I will go over this with you in the video. But I want to go back to the scripture real quick, and I just want to give you a refresher on what this is tied to in the book of Revelation and how this all was prophesied a long time ago, that this is exactly what we would be dealing with at this point in time in our history in the future. So I'm going to go to 17, and this is going to be 17:8. Now, I'm reading this out of the 1560 Geneva Bible because the current translations, in my opinion, do not read as well in terms of this particular prophecy that's in the book. So I just want to say that's the reason for this. It does read a little bit differently, and I think it's important that I read this one as opposed to other versions for this particular video. So I'm going to get into the start here, 17:8, and I'm drifting forward just a little bit. I just want to start here. And this is the angel showing John in this vision what he saw. I will show thee the mystery of the woman. Now he's referring to this woman that was riding this hybrid beast. And of that beast that was beneath her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou hast seen was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and shall go into perdition. So I want to explain to you what he's saying there. He's saying that the beast that John saw was the Roman Empire. But at the time in which he was having this vision, or the time period in which this vision was unfolding, the beast had already been destroyed. The Roman Empire had already been destroyed at the time in which he was seeing this vision, or that's what this vision was conveying. But it was also saying that the beast would return afterwards. And then when the beast returns, it will go on towards destruction, perdition, because the beast ultimately will return again to then ultimately be destroyed again. So I want to go a little bit further into this because this is something that, this ties into it as well. But real quick, so with regard to this beast, this hybrid beast, the Roman Empire, as we all know, going back, was a very evil empire. The period of time in which Jesus returned for his second coming, he came back because the Roman Empire was on its way to taking over the world. That was the whole purpose of the Roman Empire. It was an empire, and the purpose of the empire was to control the world, to essentially rule the world. So it'd be a one world government. And that's why Jesus had to return to destroy it before it ended up getting that far. We're experiencing the same exact thing today. History repeats. Okay, so that's what's going on here. So now I want to go to Revelation 21 through 5, and I'm going to read this out of my Living Bible. It's just easier to read. The print's bigger. But we have to now wonder, okay, so how did this happen? How did the beast return after the millennial reign? And how did all of the armies associated with the beast return as well? And so if we get into Revelation 21 through 5, I'm going to start from the top because I just kind of want to give you a good basis, a good foundation leading up to the verses that are very, very important in terms of all of this. So I'm just going to start from the top here. So then I saw an angel come down from heaven with the key to the bottomless pit and a heavy chain in his hand. He seized the dragon, that old serpent, the devil, Satan, and bound him in chains for 1,000 years, and threw him into the bottomless pit, which he then shut and locked so that he could not fool the nations anymore until the 1,000 years were finished. Afterwards, he would be released again for a little while, Satan's little season. This is 24. Then I saw thrones, and sitting on them were those who had been given the right to judge. He's talking about the apostles that were promised the position to judge. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their testimony about Jesus, for proclaiming the word of God, and who had not worshipped the creature, which would be Nero Caesar, or his statue, nor accepted his mark on their foreheads or their hands. They had come to life again, and now they reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. So that's the saints, the apostles, the people that had not taken the mark of the beast, the followers of Jesus Christ, were resurrected, came back to life to be with him for 1,000 years. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. This is the first resurrection, is what it says. So he's saying that they were resurrected at that particular time for the 1,000-year reign with him. But get this. This is the part that's very interesting. It says, the rest of the dead did not come back to life until the 1,000 years had ended. He's referring to those who had taken the mark, those who were part of Satan's armies, those who were Satan worshipers, those who took the mark, etc., etc. They were dead to Christ, spiritually dead to Christ. They are the ones that came back after the 1,000-year millennial reign ended, along with Satan, who was released from his bottomless pit. So, what happened? The Roman Empire returned. As what? The Vatican. So that is now the new, or the current day Roman Empire is the Vatican. It wasn't always like this. 250 years ago, it was the Holy Roman Empire when it returned. So over the last 250 years, it has evolved into something that is what you see here. I'm going to review this with you today. A much more complex, much more covert operation. Something that I would gather 99% of the general public has no idea that this even exists, at least in large part. So now I want to just give you a few fun facts about this Vatican, because I don't know if you know this or not, but these are some things that I thought might be of interest to you. So did you know that the Vatican City resides within the city of Rome itself? So isn't that kind of strange? A city residing within a city. Well, it's also the smallest country in the world. So the Vatican City is not only a city, it's also a country, and has been an independent state since 1929 due to the Lateran Treaty. I'm not going to get into the details of that treaty, but what that treaty did, it gave the city full control over its own affairs. So it had complete and total power. This was the time in which the hybrid beast had become fully restored with its power once again. So this was something that took a while. It was an evolution to get there. And just in case you didn't know, the Vatican City just so happens to be the headquarters of the Roman Catholic Church. So we'll get into that a little bit more as we get in further into this video. Now there's one more thing. The empire returned, but this time it returned in the shadows of the church. So what Satan did and his armies is created this evil empire. This is the evil empire, but it resides behind the Roman Catholic Church with a man dressed in white, the white pope. So it is essentially a wolf in sheep's clothing. Now I'm going to go on to Revelation 17:10 through 11, because I just want to cover one more aspect of this in terms of the prophecies and how that relates to this. So if we go back to 17:10 through 11, this is referring to, let's see here, where are we? Okay. This is referring to the kings. So I just want to point this out because this is another part of the prophecy that's really important to just be aware of in terms of what was also stated at that time. It says, they also, well, let me go to 17:9. And now think hard, his 7 heads. Now we're going back to the beast again. So now think hard. His 7 heads represent a certain city built on 7 hills where this woman has her residence. So Rome had her residence there. These 7 heads represent the city, Rome, okay? Also, they represent 7 kings. 5 have already fallen. The 6th now reigns. So it was now, during the time of this prophecy, it was referring to Nero Caesar reigning because the 5 prior Caesars had died. He was the 6th Caesar, if you count Julius. It says, and the 7th is yet to come. My belief is, and I'm just going based on what I believe, based on research that I've done, this 7th king that it's referring to is the one that's here. Because now this empire has finally gotten back to a place in time where it has full authority and power like it did before. And now you have this 7th king, and it says here, his reign will be brief. I'll get into that a little bit further. The scarlet animal that died is the 8th king. Now he's referring to the scarlet animal that died is the 8th king. That would be Satan himself, having reigned before as one of the 7. After his 2nd reign, he too will go to his doom. So this goes back to what I read before about going to his destruction. Once the Roman Empire returns, Satan is the basis of the Roman Empire. It's his empire. The king and the reason why it says he reigns twice is because he gave his full authority and throne to Nero Caesar as the 6th. Now, my belief is this guy here is gone. That's my belief. As we sit here right now today, my belief is he's gone. Satan is currently running the show still because he still has yet to be thrown into the lake of fire. But my personal feeling is that's what this is telling us. This king here is gone before this goes away, because this remains intact at least intact to a certain degree, until Satan ends up in the lake of fire, his perdition, his doom, his destruction. So that's what I want to just kind of cover there in terms of the backdrop to all of this. Now I want to go to this model or this structure. Now, for starters, I just want to say that I'm not telling you that this is 100% factual, not at all. This is what I've put together based on my own research that I've done. I have used my own discernment. I believe that my resources are reliable, but I want you to use your own discernment, do your own research. But this is the structure that I have come up with in terms of this evil empire. Now, the other thing about this drawing here that you see, is there's a lot going on here. I apologize, I can't get a bigger whiteboard to fit into the frame. So this is what we have. But to help you out, what I've done is I've color-coded it. So we have the red. Now the red, in terms of my color coding always designates Satan. It's part of Satan's armies. It's part of Satan. It's a satanic color, red, right? So that's why I have red here. The black is signifying the secrecy, the shadowy, the other aspects of this particular empire. It's covert. It's behind the scenes. And so when they wear the black, that is telling you that it's covert. It's shadowy. It's behind the scenes. It's secretive. And that's what this is. So these components that are in black and red are the secretive components that are essentially components of Satan and his armies. That's the black and the red on here. Now, if we go to the blue is specific to those who are involved in the global strategy. The global strategy of this operation, this structure, is to rule the world. Again, a one world government. That's it, just like before. And then the green is the finances. It's the color of money. So the green is related to all of the aspects that are financial power. Money is power. How do you rule the world? Through power. How do you gain that? Through money. So that's how this whole structure is set up. So what I want to do is I'm just going to give you a quick overview of this, because then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into detail on the different aspects of this structure. So I'm going to just start from the top here. So this is the Italian Catholic Vatican. So the Romans here, Rome resides in Italy, so it would be Italian because we're Rome. So again, that's the correlation there between the two. Okay, and then we know that it's Catholic, okay, because it's concealed by the church. And we also know that it's the Vatican. This is the operation. This is the operative. This is what runs the show. So I call this secret mastery, because this is mastery of secrecy without question. And so if you look at the global strategy here, we have Israel as part of this. I'll get into that in just a minute. This is called the Vatican colony, so I'll get into that in just a minute. But I want to start from the top, the tip of the spear. The gray pope is what he's referred to as. So there's 3 popes. This is the gray pope. He is the leader of all. He is the king of Rome. He is the chief. Now, the other part of this is the black nobility. That's the Roman families. So he's also part of the black nobility. These are the Roman families that reside underneath the chief himself, the king of Rome, and they're the base of power, ultimate control. So between him and the families of the black nobility, complete and full control of this entire structure, period. Now, if I go over here, we have the black pope. He's the Jesuit superior general. And so you have the Jesuits over here, the shadowy militia, combined with the CIA, which is the intelligence group that works alongside the Jesuits, and the Knights of Malta, which is the military operation. This is the shadowy militia over here that gets things done. Then if we go over here to the other side, let's go to the finances. We have allies. Lots of allies that help with the finances. But mainly these 2 big ones here, which are the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, you've probably heard of them. They are the executors of finance and industry. That's the role that they play. And then below them, you have what I refer to as the dirty workers. These are the guys that do all the dirty work. The cartels, mafias, terrorist groups, which I couldn't fit in there, guerrillas. These are considered to be the enforcers. Then if we go back to the center here, this is where we have the secret societies and the purveyors of the structure or the agenda, if you will, that they're trying to impose. So the Illuminati is subordinate of the Jesuits. Okay, so that's tied in with the Jesuits. You have the Freemasons. That is a massive global fraternity. You have the Club of Rome. This is essentially the brains behind the operation. And the Bilderberg group carries out what the brains have come up with. Then you have the Committee of 300, which is essentially the operational arm. This is the operations here. The Council on Foreign Relations. These are the infiltrators of governments. And then you have, of course, these global, we know who they are, these global players here. These are the, let's see, three agencies, the global agencies. Okay, the WF, WHO, NATO, UN, you're familiar with them. And then we have down here at the very bottom, well, before I get to that, then we have the white Pope over here. So he doesn't have much power. He's really just the face of the franchise. He's just a squeaky clean guy wearing white. So that you think that everything that's going on here is on the up and up, and it's nice and squeaky clean, and he's the guy that gives that impression. But he is under full control of the black Pope, the gray Pope. He has very little power in all of this, but he is the front man. And then below that, you have the Catholic Church, which is way down here. You can see how far down the way it is on the totem pole. It's way down here. You have the worker bees. I'll get into that, who they are. And then, of course, you have the institutions and how that plays a role in all of this. So that's just kind of the quick overview. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into the greater detail on what these particular components do within this structure. So let's start off with Israel. I'm referring to my notes because there's a lot here. Could not memorize all this. So Israel holds religious significance. We know this, right? Because of Zionism. Now, it has influence over politics and politicians through bribery and blackmail. So especially the U.S. politicians, they get bribed, blackmailed, you name it, and that's why they follow the agenda that's here. What the King of Rome wants to be carried out gets carried out through our politicians, many of which really don't have any choice in the matter. And then it's a tool for geopolitical instability, as we all know. And then as well as that, it's a vehicle used to fulfill prophetic biblical narratives in order to maintain its influence over Jewish and Christian populations. And isn't that the truth? So Zionism, which is attached to dispensationalism and premillennialism and futurism, are all designed to keep us in the dark about the actual times that we're living in. This is all a setup to keep us deceived, thinking that Jesus Christ never came back for the millennial reign. So that's how they, with Christians and Jews, and they also, that's how they keep us, at odds with one another, a lot of things. So there's a lot more that goes into Israel, but I'm just kind of covering the main points here. Now, if I get on to the Great Pope here, this is Pepe Orsini. He came around the late 20th century, so he's only been in the position for about 30 years. That's why I think he's the one that the prophecies are referring to in terms of him being there for a short time. My belief is he's already been eradicated, and I'll go into great more detail on that later in terms of why I feel that is. But he is the overseer of global finance, which is financial power, and global politics, because those are the two things that really matter if you're trying to rule the world. It's money and it's politics. So that's what he's there to do. Now, the black nobility, this is the Orsini family, the ancient Roman families. This is, again, why I think that this is tied into that prophecy, because he would be another king of the I think it's the Julio-Claudian family, okay, the Caesars. Now, it's claimed that the Orsini family descended from the Caesars of the times of the Roman Empire, which is why I came up with that. Now, these very papal, okay, which is referring to this Catholic Pope idea, or Ptolemaic bloodlines are often associated with the black nobility, okay? So we're going way back to ancient Rome, Italian aristocratic families, who always operated behind the scenes in the dark, but had a lot of money and power and wealth. Now, the other part of this is they're also referred to as the Saturnian elites. And what does that mean? Well, that means they're Satan worshipers. So the Saturnian elites are the worshipers of Saturn or Satan. Now, they worship Saturn, Baal, Moloch, just the same as the Phoenicians and the Canaanites from the Old Testament. So there's ties to those from that time period. And then the black cube, which is part of the Saturn worship, is used as symbolism for their methodology, okay, which is structure, materialism, and control. These are all components of Saturn, the cube. I'm going to go a little bit further. The same black cube is referred to the Kaaba, okay, in the Islamic Muslim religion, Islam. Okay, now they have this cube called the Kaaba. It's big, it's huge. And I don't know if you've seen any videos on that, but it's this big black cube. And this is something that is the most sacred site of all in terms of Islam. This cube is a focal point of prayer. It's a focal point of worship. It's a focal point of rituals. The black cube, they claim that they don't worship it, but it would certainly seem to me that they do. They're just not admitting to the fact, at least not based on the channels that I've looked into to find out. They deny that. But it would certainly look like that's what they're doing if you watch any video of them doing their rituals. Looks like they're worshiping it to me. But anyways, that's the interesting tie-in. Because just today, or was it yesterday, the Pope went and signed some papers with some sort of Islamic treaty of some nature. I don't know the details. I didn't pay attention to it that closely. But the other thing is apparently he has a mosque residing within the Catholic, I'm trying to remember the actual place. But anyway, so there's now this thing going on between the Catholics or the Catholic Church and the Islamists uniting or unifying. There's unification there. So that makes total sense. They're both Saturnian worshipers. So it just makes sense. They're all Satan worshipers. So that would make total sense that they're uniting because of that. Now we get on to the Black Pope. Arturo Sosa. He's a Venezuelan priest, or was a Venezuelan priest, I guess. Now that's very interesting because Venezuela, right, as we all know, is where we went and eradicated the evildoers from Venezuela not too long ago, and the head kingpin, Maduro, down there. And there was a lot of corruption going on there in Venezuela. So it doesn't surprise me that that's where he came from. Now, he's also the Jesuit Superior General, which I told you that, which is considered to be the puppet master. Get this. He's the head of the Society of Jesus. That's wild. The Jesuits is actually a name. It's short, or a description of this society, a name for this Society of Jesus, which is complete blasphemy. This is no Society of Jesus at all, but that's what they call it. Call it the Jesuits for short. Now, let's move on to the Jesuits. The largest male religious order in the Roman Catholic Church, heavily associated with the Roman Catholic Church. These are the intellectuals, the infiltrators, the orchestrators of the Vatican's army. They're the guys that are clean. They're on the clean side. They do the work where they keep themselves clean. They are the advisors, assassins, scientists, educators. They work within governments, churches, corporations. They are all over the place. Tens of thousands of them, from what I understand. They're also attached to the CIA, connected to the CIA, which is the intelligence agency designed to advance the power structure of all of this by suppressing opposition, orchestrating wars, drug trafficking, and assassinations. Think about JFK. I don't know if you know the story behind that, but he had the issues with them a lot of it had to do with Israel at the time. And then again, the story is that the CIA were the ones that had him assassinated because he did not want this to become a colony of this evil empire. And they assassinated him, and then it became one. Then we have the Knights of Malta. Now, this is the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. That's what they call it. This is the arm of international intelligence, which enforces the hidden control of Western nations while engineering global conflicts and regime changes. So all of these things are done behind the scenes through infiltration, through hidden schemes and hidden channels. And that's how this model works. It's all deception. We don't see it on the surface. Now I want to get into the allies and the franchisees, which we call the puppets. So the white nobility is the name given to these guys over here, the Brits, predominantly. So understand that the Brits are in bed with the Vatican, big time. The Rockefellers and the Rothschilds are the executors of global finance and industry, as well as policy implementation. The Rockefellers are the industrial machine in all kinds of industries. Energy, think oil, and then also big pharmaceuticals. Now, if we think about what's happening in the world today and what has been happening with the war with Iran, the British guys over here, okay, the white nobility over here, these guys have been working with Iran to do all kinds of funny money things. And now we have essentially put them in a position where Britain no longer has the dirty money and the dirty oil and all of that stuff flowing. And a lot of the finances are being thwarted and cut off. And so that is a really awesome thing that's taking place. And that's why I say a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now that's going on is based on wars that we've already won or battles that we've already won in terms of eradicating these evil people from these positions of power so that we can have success in eliminating this evil empire here. Okay, now if we move on to, let's see what else we got here. Okay, so let's go to the Rothschilds. They handle the banking and financial arm of the system. Like I said, that's where the money goes. It's where the money flows. The London banks, the world banks, the Federal Reserve, all of these aspects. And that's why we're going to see these things going away. At this point in time, we have control over this particular situation, and these things are going to be going away in the near future. It's going to be awesome to see. Now let's get on to the dirty workers, the cartels, the mafias, the terrorist groups, the guerrillas. These are the proxy destabilizers, money launderers, the revenue generators. And they do this through their territorial franchises. So what the deal is they are given territories to control. And then as long as they do their work and they do it well, they keep their territory. If they don't, if they screw up or if they try skimming off the top or whatever, then they lose their territory and somebody else gets it. So that's the arrangement with these dirty workers, is these territories, which you'd kind of consider as franchises. And just to give you some examples, the Mexican and South American cartels, which are that's where a lot of them reside. They're just one example of this. The cartels predominantly generate cash flow from the trafficking of drugs, humans, whether they're dead or alive, as well as oil. So remember, the Venezuela oil tankers, that got shut down. And now the oil tankers are being utilized to actually provide income for the country of Venezuela, not all of these dirty workers. And so that's what happened there. And then they also spend quite a bit of time and energy with the trafficking of arms. But this all goes back to the human trafficking, which we have been really heavily focused on stopping. It has a lot to do with the closed borders, has a lot to do with infiltrating these places where they dwell, and all of these things that are taking place, made a lot of success there. Now, I want to move on to the terrorists and the guerrillas. These are engineered proxy forces used for destabilization. So we know this. The terrorist groups are always there to destabilize, create constant chaos, disruption, false flag operations, as well as geopolitical control through those operations. And then the Jesuits provide the training and backing for these armies so they can topple governments and suppress any sort of opposition. So if you think about these governments that have been toppled in the past through terrorist acts, things of that nature, it's all connected. And that's how these governments are toppled. Then they put a regime in there that they want. Then that regime ultimately starts to become part of a global empire. And that's something that was going on for quite some time. Okay, now we're going to get on to the secret societies and the purveyors of policy. These groups here. So the Illuminati is a powerful and influential Jesuit subordinate, like I said before, subordinate, responsible for the recruitment, subversion, and coordination of lower tier worker bee assets. So those are these people down here. So the Illuminati has a lot to do with the worker bees and controlling and coordinating those groups down there, as well as the subversion. Okay, and that goes back to the blackmail and the bribery, things of that nature. Then we have the Freemasons. They are used for mass infiltration and coordination. A massive global fraternity that recruits and aligns mid-level elites, as well as judges, law enforcement, and businessmen with hidden directives from above. They also provide the political and intelligence cover for these guys over here. So they work hand in hand, helping these guys over here do their dirty work. We'll move on to the Club of Rome here. It's the brain that crafts the justifications for the UN agenda, responsible for engineering the intellectual and strategic blueprint of the New World Order. So this Club of Rome is highly responsible, could have also done that in blue, I guess, for this global strategy, for carrying out this global strategy of a one world government. And this is done via global policies, the narratives that shape economies, governments, and media. So let's just think about the green scam or the green directive as an example. And then it also promotes zero growth agendas and artificial scarcity. So let me cover those real quick. So the zero growth agendas would be, let's just say, outsourcing manufacturing from one country to another. And that's what happened here in the United States, is the manufacturing was outsourced to China. What that did is it put the United States into a zero growth, because without manufacturing, without production, it's very difficult to grow your GDP. You, at some point in time, end up in a zero growth state because you're not producing anything. And that's why we're bringing production back here. That's why we have oil tankers lining up to get filled with oil, because now we're drilling again and we're producing energy. We're producing oil and energy. So we're getting back to that, and that's why the president has been making such a push on getting that done. And then the artificial scarcity is the scarcity of the oil, for example. There is no scarcity of oil. There's plenty of it. God put it there for a reason, and we have more than we'll ever need. That's just artificial scarcity. And then, of course, population reduction is also part of the Club of Rome brain trust, because they knew they could not control 8 billion people, or however many there are. We don't know the exact number. So they were going to have to reduce the population, my understanding is down to 1 billion or less, to have success in controlling a population that was of size that would be manageable. So weaponizing climate narratives, economies, and culture via open borders, big part of the agenda in terms of a one world government ruling over the entire earth. The Bilderberg Group works in tandem with the Club of Rome via high-level policy coordination and implementation of directives from the top. So this is a body or a group that maintains control over politics, finance, and media in order to gradually erode national sovereignty. So all of this is designed to ultimately just erode nations and their individual cultures, their individual sovereignty, so that ultimately they just meld right into a single one world nation. Then we have the Committee of 300. And this is kind of a biggie here. These aren't necessarily in order of power or anything like that. They're just here. But the Committee of 300 is very, very powerful. And it's an elite council blending Anglo-American financiers with the black nobility families. So they are highly, in terms of let's just say the hierarchy here, they're really close to the black nobility. They would really be kind of sitting directly below the black nobility in terms of the hierarchy. And so it's an executive arm that oversees operations. It's the operational arm to make sure that everything is operating as such. Then we have the Council on Foreign Relations. This is a policy planning, propaganda, and government infiltration arm. Now, if you recall, the President Trump talking about how the enemy is on the inside, the enemy is from within. This is exactly what he was referring to, the infiltration through this particular arm designed to shape and infiltrate U.S. foreign policy. The members are politicians, CEOs, and academics who hold key positions, ensuring that the policies from above are carried out. So you can see that we have the infiltration and the all of these things going on here that are coming from so many different directions. So if you're kind of wondering why is this process taking the time that it's taking for us to take down, this has been going on for quite some time, but you can see how much of a tangled web this is. They've been very busy over the last 250 years building this. And it is extremely large in scale, massive. I'm just kind of touching the surface here on this. So it's something that does take a long time to work through strategically to ultimately break this thing down and destroy it. Let's get into the global agencies real quick. They provide the operational enforcement, policy implementation, and global governance. They impose the one world government agenda onto the nation states of the world. That's what they do, is they impose this structure through the WEF, which executes the Great Reset vision. These are the ones that were responsible for the lockdowns. They're the ones that wanted to implement the CBDCs, not to be confused with the new money that we're going to have here in the United States, which will be digital. Please don't confuse the two. They are not at all alike, completely different. And then also wanting to utilize, the WF, wanting to use AI as God made in the image of man. If you've seen or witnessed any of that going on, that was their ultimate goal with AI. Then you have the WHO. This is the control arm for depopulation. Imagine that. So and behavioral conditioning. So just think about COVID. Okay, so COVID was a WHO operation for depopulation, behavioral conditioning. We all know what that looks like. We have NATO, the military enforcement arm. This is ensuring military compliance. We no longer are part of NATO, no longer part of the UN, no part of the WHO. We are no part of the WEF. You see all of these things that we have removed ourselves from as the United States of America, because these operations relied on us to be successful. Now they are being torn down and destroyed. So they no longer exist. Okay, and then the UN was the primary tool or vehicle for erosion of national sovereignty. So the United Nations was busy at work carrying that out as well. So you can get an idea then of the power structures within this model and how incredibly powerful this can be when this thing gets up and running to its, to the point to where it's running at maximum efficiency, if you will. And you have all of these players out there, Satan and his armies doing their thing. It's incredible what they've been able to accomplish by being very focused on their agendas. Now, I want to get into the best part of this, of all. That's the Catholic Church over here. So we have the white Pope over here, who again doesn't have much power at all. He's selected and guided and overruled by the powers above. He provides moral cover for the global agendas. You can see him doing that now. He has these interfaith initiatives, blending the different religions together. This is the interfaith initiative that's going on now. And then he sanctifies and normalizes idolatry for the masses through these idolatrous acts that he does and that the church does. But the thing I want to go back to real quick with this is this issue that he had with the war with Iran, because obviously he's painting the picture that the war with Iran is about bloodshed and it's about, not having peace in this world. It's all BS. This is what he's there to do, is to get the general public to think that he's the good guy wanting peace on this earth. Meanwhile, this is all going on behind the scenes, okay? And he's over here in front of the camera telling us how we need to have peace on earth and that the Iran war is anything but. Because the Iran war is destroying this tower of power, destroying it. It's one of the last legs to break. Okay, so real quick, the Catholic Church. Now, this is a visible facade, okay, and the spiritual ideological control mechanism, as well as the operational headquarters. So crazy that you have the operational headquarters going through the church. But that's how they run a lot of these things through the money laundering systems. This is how they use it as a cover for all of the evil things that they're doing. Now, the Catholic Church also does this. It's a spiritual and psychological control mechanism designed to shape mass, get it, play on words, mass behavior, and to maintain obedience across cultures and nations. Because if you can get everybody, it's the largest religion in the world, 1.4 billion from what I understand, by far the largest religion in the world. So how do you keep all of these people suppressed? How do you keep them from creating a stir? You wrap them into this church, and then they are limited because of their religious beliefs and what the Pope says, telling them what to do and not do, they follow. So it also shields the power structure from any scrutiny, of course, because the Catholic Church never has any blood on its hands. And that's true. It keeps itself squeaky clean on the surface. Meanwhile, the blood is all over the place in the background. The wolf is super bloody, the sheep is not. Or at least the sheep's clothing, I should say. Let's see, it's also the primary vehicle for institutionalized idol worship. If you haven't noticed, that's what it is. It's a rebranded continuation of ancient Babylonian, Egyptian, and Saturnalian religions. So if we go back to the idol worship from the Old Testament, these groups involved in that, these peoples, the Phoenicians, the Canaanites, those people are part of this black nobility family. So they carry this idol worship down here to the church. But it's painted as something other than that. It's reframed, it's rebranded as something different, but it's idol worship just the same. So it's deception on a grand scale. Then if we go to the institutions down here, and I'm not going to get real deep into the popes and the priests and cardinals and bishops, where they're part of the church. I'm not going to get into great detail there. But I want to get to the institutions, where we have the universities, the schooling, and the indoctrination. Okay, so there are Jesuit schools, specifically. There are colleges that are Georgetown, Fordham. I mean, there are colleges that are very, very specifically Jesuit schools. This is where they recruit and indoctrinate the elites. The elites, people that go to these schools become indoctrinated, they become recruited, they get into the system. Next thing you know, they're part of Satan's armies. And then the public institutions indoctrinate the students of all ages. So our friend over here, Mr. Rockefeller, was really good about taking the school curriculum in the early 1900s and changing it so that people would become workers, not thinkers. And so the institutions have had a lot to do with the indoctrination of this and people actually backing this up because of what they've learned or not learned in school. And then, of course, we have the worker bees here. So these are the politicians, the bankers, and the CEOs. You think about Bill Gates. You think, oh, he's an elite. He's high on the hierarchy right? Not really. He's way down here. He's just a worker bee in grand scheme of things in terms of this power structure. These guys are just worker bees down here. But this is the thing about the worker bees. They're the low-level workers. Believe that. These are the elites that are the low-level workers, used to manipulate public opinion, protect economic interests, of course, through their corporations, manipulate public opinion through the politicians, and then extract resources from the public. Well, how do they do that? Well, that would be the bankers. The bankers are real good at extracting resources, money from the people. Then the other part of this, they're also involved in surveillance and the controlling the flow of information. So just think about social media. Think about Facebook, for example, what Facebook has done in the past and what they've been caught doing. Think about cell phones, just as an example. Information, gathering information from our cell phones, whatever we speak, whatever we send, whatever we do. Cell towers, of course, affiliated with that. And then the mainstream media also. So that's all part of the indoctrination, is the propaganda. That's how they get us thinking a certain way over here. And they use these worker bees to carry a lot of this out. So it's a very interesting and very deceptive model. So I wanted to share that with you because it's important to know what's going on behind the scenes, especially now, because there are so many incredible things taking place in terms of what the U.S. military is doing, what the President of the United States is doing. If you think that he's not getting it done, then quit listening to the people that you're listening to, because that's what this entity is trying to do, is to convince all of you, all of us, that the President of the United States is a schmuck. Meanwhile, he and the military and other people, other nations, a lot of other people involved, are helping to free the world from these evil oppressors. And it's all happening as I speak, and it is happening in record time. Now, a lot of incredible things are taking place. But I want to go back a little bit real quick, because I just want to talk to you a little bit about how this ties into my prior video on the 16th century Bibles. Because as you may recall, if you've watched the video, if you haven't, please go back and watch. I don't remember what episode it is. I don't want to mislead you and tell you. Oh, I have the number here. It's 28. Sorry, episode 28. So this is the 16th century Bibles and religions. If you haven't watched it, I recommend that you do so, because it will help you to understand how this all began at the infancy of Satan's little season, which was during the period of time in which those Bibles were being translated from Greek and Hebrew into English. And there's a few things I just want to remind you of in terms of that particular period of time, because that Holy Roman Empire that was in power at that time evolved into this empire right here. And this is what was going on at that time. So when these individuals, and this would be William Tyndale, who translated the Tyndale Bible in 1525, the first version. And then let me talk about him first. So his Bible was being burned and banned because the priestly authority, those in power, considered it to be heretical and threatening to their ecclesiastical control, the power structures of the church. The church is here. Look at the power structures of the church. They didn't want us to be able to read this book, because they knew if we were able to read this book would shine the light on what's going on over here, and we would know what the heck's going on. And that's the beautiful thing about this book. So let's go on a little bit further to a couple more things. So then he was arrested by the Holy Roman Empire, agents of the Holy Roman Empire. And he was accused of Lutheran heresy, mainly because of his Protestant views and criticism of certain Catholic practices. So again, here you have somebody who's being critical of what's going on over here. And what do? They arrest him for it. They felt that his Reformation ideas undermined, again, the ecclesiastical authority. They didn't want their authority to be undermined by us reading the Holy Bible. He was tried under the Holy Roman authority. Here's another arm. See, they have all of these different arms, just like we have over here. That's a Catholic entity. He was then handed over to the secular arm. This is another entity, the rulers and government powers at the time, for punishment in order to keep the hands of the Catholic Church clean. Same thing. Keep the church clean down here. Do all the dirty work over here with the dirty workers. Let them do that. And then he was tried under the Holy Roman authority, another entity, which was Catholic. Handed over to, already covered that, handed over to the secular arm for punishment to keep him clean. Then after his sentencing, he was tortured, strangled at the stake, and burned publicly for all to see. Now I'm going to cover one more gentleman. This is John Rogers. He was responsible for the Matthew's Bible of 1537. Now he had a speech. It was called the Pestilent Popery Speech. And this was something that immediately led to house arrest because they didn't like him using the word pestilence, which is a fatal, contagious, and destructive evil influence. And that's how he was describing the church. The Roman Catholic Church is how he was describing it, as well as a deadly, rapidly spreading plague. Hence the word the popery. So the Protestants commonly used pestilence to describe Roman Catholicism as a disease and an idolatrous, authoritarian system. Well, why do you think that is? Look what this became. 250 years ago, these guys were, less than that, it's about 200 years ago. I'm not going to get into all the dates. That's in that video. But about 200 years ago, that's what these guys were doing. They saw this full well. They saw what was coming, and they were trying to make people aware of it by talking about it, by speaking about it, and also by making sure that we had these Bibles in the English translations so that we would know what was going on with regard to this whole structure here. And then John Rogers was burned at the stake, much like William Tyndale. And he was burned at the stake in front of his family and children and all of that. But that's what they did with those two guys. So I just wanted to share that with you. If you haven't watched that video, if you're not familiar with it, it's a great lead in to what's going on here, because if we go back 200 years, these guys saw this. The writing was on the wall. They knew this is what we were going to be dealing with. And thank God they were able to help us get these actual English translations out to the world. And the beautiful thing is I resort to some of these, like the 1560 Geneva still today, and this Living Bible, which is a Tyndale publishing house Bible in honor of him, is, again, just one of the other modern day translations that is helpful. It's not perfect, but it is very helpful in terms of knowing the truth. I had somebody ask me today, why is it that we don't have prophets anymore? And my response was, because we have the Bible. Everything that was prophesied is in the Bible. Everything that we really need to know is in here. We just need to know, we need to learn how to read it correctly. We need to know how to understand it. And that's part of being filled with the Holy Spirit and having other guides and things to help you, this channel just being one. So anyways, thanks for being here for this. I hope this was helpful to you. If it was, please give me a thumbs up. If this would be helpful to somebody else that you know, please share it with them. And also, give me your comments and questions. Always appreciate those. If you have anything to add or anything to ask, please feel free. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so I can continue to keep content such as this coming your way, because the truth is the light, and the light is what allows us to see through the darkness. So until next time, be wise, God bless, take care. I love you all, and I'll see you soon.